Welcome today to an extraordinary, important subject. Is it my decision to die? We will address three questions. Coping with suicide. Does suicide lead to hell? What does Judaism say about assisted suicides? Welcome. This is Rabbi Pell. Our first question, does suicide lead to hell? The second question, coping with suicide. What does Judaism say about assisted suicide? Is it true, someone asked us, that if you commit suicide, you won't go to heaven? But if there is no Jewish hell, where will you go? The answer is, certainly I hope the reason you're asking about suicide has nothing whatsoever to do with your current state of mind or circumstances in real life. It's not a pleasant issue to be thinking about suicide. Your question, if there is no Jewish hell, well, not exactly true. If you've ever overstuffed yourself at the Jewish simcha, the night afterwards was certainly a form of Jewish hell. But aside from that, we find a place called Gehenna, mentioned in the Bible and discussed at length in the Talmud and many of the classical Jewish works. Think of hell as a sort of laundromat to clean up the souls that have been soiled in their passage through this world. Once sparkling clean, they can continue up in their spiritual place from where they originated. So they go to the laundromat to clean up and then continue up into higher levels. So a neshama, a soul that was involved in a very serious crime, such as homicide, God forbid, needs a very heavy-duty wash to get back into shape. Suicide is considered just the same as any other homicide. Your life doesn't belong to you any more than anyone else's life belongs to you. All life begins and belongs to the giver of life, Hashem. And Hashem, He doesn't appreciate life being destroyed wantonly. Nevertheless, let us keep in mind there are those who commit suicide out of extreme distress and emotional agony. Then, of course, we leave that up to the knower of all souls, to God Himself, the same one who gives life, also known as God, to know whether this person really had any free choice left in his soul. So according to that knowledge, the cleanup will be, affordedly and presented and helping that sad soul. Let's talk about the second question, coping with suicide in the family or with a friend around us. And the question that came recently, someone writes, my nephew was found dead in his room. We know it was suicide. His father, my sister's husband, and my husband's brother was against his choice of fiancé. We told everyone it was a heart attack. He had heart problems before. My sister is not coping well. She seems to be in denial. Nobody wants to discuss this. Please give me some advice. We suggest the following response. This is not something you can just forget about and get on with life. This is something that must be thought about, and we must change the course of life, or it will be forever sending life into circles. Tragedy is an implosion, really, of negative energy, draining away all warmth and light. These kinds of tragedies suck away at the spirit of our lives like a monstrous leech. And yet, we must remember, we have the power to grab that energy by the reins and turn it around into a powerful aspect for good. A greater good that any positive energy could have provided. How can we do that? Certainly not by stewing over our remorse and guilt, nor by attempting to keep it stuffed under our pillows. But if your nephew's early demise will lead you to be a more caring person and your sister to be a more caring mother, then he did not die without meaning. Really, nothing is without meaning. We believe in one benevolent God who directs all of heaven and earth. If so, we all believe that every event of life is meant to propel us, to move us forward. God does not allow tragedy into this world just for the heck of it. Everything must have a meaning, just as the meaning can be known only from the sometimes from the final results. And the final result is in your hands. Here is the best therapy for you. There are people in your family, your children, your sisters and others, who need you and care and need you to be there with them right now. They need a soothing voice, a warm heart, a word of encouragement, a dose of optimism. Most of all, they need an open ear into which to pour the bitterness of their souls and a shoulder on which to cry. You will become that person, even if you do not have the capability. Imagine you never had this capability before. You'll find the strength. That doesn't matter. You'll find it. You will channel the horror and the guilt over your nephew's death into your own transformation. And there, all the bitterness will become sweet. What can you tell your sister to tell you? I would have to imagine myself as her, and honestly, I'm afraid to even begin to do that. All I can say is that God, Hashem, must have given you the strength to be able to deal with this. Listen to her, listen deeply, and the words will come. We mourn death because we cherish life. That is why we place a limit on the days of mourning, 7 days of intense mourning, and 1 month of remembering. And then life continues, yet higher. We don't destroy life by mourning the past. We learn from death to count our days as one would count one's jewels. For the only vantage point from which we can measure their value is from how we've lived those days to the very last one. Then, that's the time when we can ask, what did I do with life that God gave me? Was it a worthwhile gift, the life I lived on this world? Was it all worthwhile? And certainly our hearts go out and wish you strength in this challenge to go from strength to strength. I move on to our third question. What about assisted suicide? You all remember recently in the papers the tragic death of Brittany Maynard. This was a beautiful 29-year-old who recently appeared on the cover of People magazine and has been featured in hundreds of news articles. She took her own life just recently in order to avoid the slow deterioration of the terrible illness which she had been diagnosed with. As a post on her website, she said, Brittany chose to make a well thought out and informed choice to die with dignity in the face of a terrible, painful, and incurable illness. She moved to Oregon to pass away in a little yellow house she picked out in the beautiful city of Portland. I also share with you a statement made by Compassions and Choices. This is an end-of-life choice advocacy group that had been working closely with Maynard. And they said, died as she intended, peacefully in her bedroom, in the arms of her loved ones. Maynard was diagnosed with a malignant brain tumor last January. Barely a year after, she and her husband were married. After several surgeries, doctors said in April that her brain tumor had returned and gave her 6 months to live. She moved from California to Oregon to take advantage of that state's law, which allows assisted suicide. One of 5 states, in fact, in which this practice is legal. Maynard is survived by her husband and his family, her mother and stepfather. And so, as you may know, in the aftermath of her death, the media have reported the remarkable support her life-ending decision seemed to have garnered from the entire world, from the public. It's hard not to feel compassion for this young woman who movingly explained her resolution on CNN, in where she said, "I do not want to die, but I'm dying, and I want to die on my own terms. Having this choice at the end of my life has become incredibly important. It has given me a sense of peace during a tumultuous time that otherwise would have been dominated by fear, uncertainty, and pain." Only the one, only Hashem, dear friends, who has given you the gift, given us all the gift of life, has the right to end it. Addressing the issue of choice last month in an opinion piece, Brittany Maynard qualified her decision. And she said, "I would not tell anyone else that he or she should choose death with dignity. My question is, who has the right to tell me that I don't deserve this choice? That I deserve to suffer for weeks or months in tremendous amounts of physical and emotional pain? Why should anyone have the right to make that decision for me?" But her reasoning has now, after her death, made her the spokesman, so to speak, for a movement. Let me tell you about this movement. This movement that seeks to legalize assisted suicide under the benevolent guise of what I quote as death with dignity. Its credo is based not only on glorifying the choice of self-inflicted death, but in a certain sense, implicitly disparaging those who select to continue their battle for life, in spite of its burdens, as nothing less than undignified. That's cruel. Brittany Maynard has unwittingly become the face of the advocacy group Compassionate Choices. And for its advocates for legalizing suicide, we need to respond with a voice that merges compassion with morality. Let me be clear. Had Brittany Maynard come to us while weighing her decision and to ask for our input, I would have shared my ambivalence between faith and feelings. Sure, we could understand her fear facing this unbearable future. We could empathize to the best of our abilities with her desire to avoid those certain horrors. Yet, to her question, who has the right to tell me that I don't deserve this choice? I would have to answer her the following manner. Only Hashem, only the one who has given you the gift of life, has the right to end it. Taking the life of another is called murder. It is not because we have no right to take someone else's life. It is because we have no right to take away life. So too, we have no right to take away our own existence from this earth. But shouldn't we have compassion for those forced to endure future pain? My feelings beg me to consider the hardships, but my faith reminds me that my concern is assuredly not greater than God's, who is all merciful, all kind, and all loving, and yet has still not decreed death. Suicide, in the simplest sense, is disagreeing with Hashem, with a divine verdict for life. To the question of why should I continue to live when I am in so much pain? God forbid. Why should I go on when I'm only a burden to others? Why should I stay the course when the end I desire is inevitable anyway? We can only find comfort in God's response to none other than Moshe, who asked God, "Show me your glory. Let me understand your ways. Why are so many tough things happening? Man cannot see me and live," God said. "I will pass before you and you will see my back, but my face you shall not see." As mortals, as human beings, we can never fully grasp of how God manages this world. Yet, there is one truth that often serves to give us a kind of a glimpse into God's wisdom. We can never see His face. As life unfolds in its mysterious ways, we're often perplexed by its cruelties, seemingly cruelties. We can be bewildered by its hardships. Yet oft times we can see His back. What do I mean? In retrospect, events take on meaning. Difficulties become recognizable as of having had a purpose in retrospect. Who is it that once said, the greatest tragedy of life is that it must be lived forwards and can only be understood backwards? For those who cannot understand the why of their suffering, the response of faith asks to withhold judgment. Divine wisdom, God's divine wisdom, is greater than ours. And for people of faith, it endows even the years of pain and anguish with deeper meaning, both for our souls as well as our opportunities for others to express noblest acts of self-sacrifice and devotion during those very difficult times. And there's something else I want to share with you. There's an additional danger to these assisted suicide situations. What needs to be said is the danger of confusing the compassion we must have for Brittany Maynard with the kind of approval for her decision that has made it's manifested and has been talked about in many circles. Let me tell you, assisted suicide poses a real danger to people with disabilities. Think about this. Who is to say that when a person has multiple sclerosis or ALS and they are now classified as terminal, who will make the determination whether disabilities deserve death as an ideal option? They're terminal, right? They're going to die quickly and horribly. Maybe we should decide on them. Terminal, forget about them. Sure enough, in the Netherlands, for instance, doctors are free to decide whether a child born with a disability should live. The government has come up with a guideline of standards, and if the medical team believes that the child or the parents would face significant suffering, then that infant can be euthanized. Forget about it. More worrisome still, my dear friends, as was reported by Marilyn Golden. She represents the Disability Rights Educational Fund in Berkeley. She's concerned that the Maynard story distorts the larger picture. And she says, for every individual with a happy family who's not at risk for abuse, there are many other individuals who may be subtly steered towards assisted suicide. Why? Or by whom? By their insurance company, or pressured by the family. She worries about that. She worries lest profit-driven managed healthcare could subtly steer the sick into the direction. What's the word? The word used? Dignity. She wonders whether in the new world of choice there is still a place for people who are sick and beyond their functioning, their usefulness in this world. Suicide does not end suffering. It ends hope. Suicide does not end suffering. It just ends hope. People in this country have bought into the premise that one really is better off dead than disabled. This is a very powerfully slippery slope when legitimizing pain and disability as a sufficient warrant for suicide. It is but another way of defining people with certain infirmities as unworthy of life. And those of us old enough to remember can recall that Nazi Germany began by exterminating what we today call the mentally challenged, and eventually moved on to the genocide of a racially inferior people. And you know who I'm talking about. Sadly, suicide today is the 10th leading cause of death in the United States. Surely all of us mourn for Brittany Maynard and all those who have opted for her solution to pain and suffering. And today in my program, in my discussion, my purpose is not to condemn them for their decision, but to daven, to pray, that all those contemplating taking their own lives choose the way of hope over despair, of prayer, acts of kindness, the way of faith over the feeling of feeling somehow abandoned by Hashem. Hashem is with us. God has His ultimate reason for everything. May Hashem bless each and every one of us with good health and happiness and the best for us and our entire family. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us.